Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Lunchtime with Anna. I first and foremost wanted to apologize. Um, I was having a few technical difficulties, and of course, being the mother of a special needs teenager, I have sometimes situations that happen at home, and I'm sure Miss Stovall is very familiar with those because she's very important in the community of special needs parents. So, um, it's just been one of those hectic mornings, and I'm sure you understand, Miss Stovall. First of
Yes.
all, I wanted to thank you for being here and taking the time and actually waiting while my son wasn't having such a good morning. So thank you.
You're welcome.
So, Miss Stovall, I seen the alert. I was tagged on it first. Well, I think one of the first posts that you made, which is a good thing because the letter A, right? Um, So tell us about it. And I want to go, then I'm going to go into some of the stuff that you've done, what made you run this time around, and so forth, so on.
All right, you ready for me to start?
Yes, you
Okay.
can start.
All right. I'm Valencia Stovall. I'm a native of Atlanta, a mother of two adult children now, but of course, children now become adults. They really still remain children. But I was educated in the Atlanta public school system. I currently reside in Forest Park. And I want to know and talk to your audience and ask them, did they know that in Congress, there's a deficit when it comes to leadership representation here in Georgia? And because we need someone that's bold, who's committed, who's going to be accessible and believe in solution driven issues being solved, that's one of the reasons why I decided to run for Congress. So I was sitting on a mission for this particular job. And I have my platform is very simple. It's the buck, the book, and the ballot. And those are words I first heard from Mayor Maynard Jackson, who was the first African American to be elected to be a mayor in a southern city. And my dad, Lovett Stovall, was his community liaison. And so he was the point person when it came to community issues. And so when you think about everything revolves around money. So the buck, which is rejuvenating the economics here in our state in Congressional District 5. The ballot, which is dealing with voter empowerment, voter education. There's no issue when it comes down to registering to vote. It's understanding who you're electing and what is their responsibility. I'm gonna go back to the buck because I want to make sure I expound on that a little bit more. So when you're thinking about healthcare issues, the access to affordable health care. It comes to workforce shortages when nurses and doctors, workforce shortages in other industries as well. Crime, which is very high now. Senior citizens have a lot of needs. My dad, who's a senior now, also housing, affordability for when issues are coming up with veterans. So there are a lot of things that are wrapped into what I call the buck. The next one, which is very dear to my heart, which is dealing with education, and that's the book. So we have to reimagine education in Georgia and nationally as well. We're dealing with a antiquated system, a school system, and we have to change it. And of course, with the crisis that happened with the pandemic, it put a lot more pressure on our educators, on parents, and students as well. And so we have to look at ways, how do we unite now to make sure that every child has access to the best education setting? And one of those legislation that you talked about a little bit earlier was House Bill 614, which was the Landon Johnson Act, which was passed in 2016. But we know now with the pandemic, there is an additional crisis for our special needs or students with learning disabilities that we have to make sure that we're focused on. We need more apprenticeship programs for our students. We also need internships for our students. And then there are a lot of departments that are underutilized that we can maximize them maximize them better if we were able to utilize them. And so that's kind of the basic with what I'm the platform running on is mainly being accessible, being solution driven. Those are things I've done in the past. I have 8/30/30, which is 8 years as a legislator. I was able to sponsor and co-sponsor over a dozen bills that were passed and signed into law. I have 30 years as a small business owner and 30 years when it comes down to community advocacy. Even after I left being a legislator, I was still active in my community. We just recently completed a teen summit. We had students coming that attended, and even we did it virtual. And also the back to school block party, yes, that we do every year. So it's never a time where I'm stopped being involved in the community. And I was asked over and over again, Representative Stovall, when are you going to come back? When are you going to run for office again? And so I'm here running for Congressional District 5 in the city of Atlanta. It takes in College Park. It takes in portions of East Point, all of Hateville, all the way up to Sandy Springs, all of Atlanta, and then North Druid Hills area, city of Decatur, and then Southwest DeKalb and Conley, and then comes back into Forest Park in Clayton County.
So, so Forest Park would be the only city in Clayton County that, aside from all of the other cities, because that was actually going to be my question to you, what exact cities is it for you? Is that the only one in Clayton County?
There are portions in Forest Park, so not all of Forest Park, and then there's a small portion in Conley in Clayton County.
Okay.
That this district, remember, it was redistricted before because of this. And so everyone, make sure when you're going to vote that you check your voter status on my voter page with the Secretary of State, because you might have you're going to have probably new representation.
Absolutely. So, I did get a few questions on a few things. Disability runs close to home for me, so I'm going to hit on the disability, but I'll wait on that one for last. This was one of my questions when it comes to parole cases, because I also have a human justice organization, so I get all kinds of questions on every aspect. What is your take? Because, right, a lot of them are not being paroled out, or, they'll say because of this, because of that. How would you react to that with a pandemic going on? Not only a pandemic going on, there could be other factors in there. What is your take, and what would you do for the community, right, when it comes to this issue at hand?
Okay, so you mentioned two things. One was disability, and then you mentioned about parole.
So we'll talk about disability after.
Okay. So the question you're asking is dealing with the parole cases
Yes,
that are now backlogged. Okay. I think that when we're looking at our system, and everyone knows that we have a system that needs to be improved tremendously. And that's on the federal level, because I worked on the state level that I understand about, we had the Department of Parole Services, and looking at those individuals who have served their time and now needs to be reacclimated back into society. So there definitely needs to be programs there. But not only programs, I was a part of Station of Hope, which was a program that the Department of Community Services did with the state of Georgia. And it was more of a faith-based type of program where you went through some training. One of the major issues came about was the funding. So you have organizations, just like what you have, and they want to do what's right and make sure that those individuals who are coming back are able to get reacclimated in, making sure that their families, because that's the whole trauma, them coming back into the family, because they may have been gone for so long. And then also having the funding there. And so that's when you look at it on the federal level, where many of our programs are federally funded. So making sure that organizations like yours and others understand that whole process and it's not so tedious of going through a process of trying to apply for grant money, and then making sure that there is funding there as well for staffing, and
Okay.
making sure that the computer system that they're utilizing is up to date. I found a lot of that to not be up to date even on the state level. So those are some of the things. And then the two, I don't know, have all the answers. So I depend a lot on organizations like yours whenever I'm facing issues or complaints that people may have, because I don't know. And we have to, as legislators, we have to depend on the community, those
Absolutely.
who are on the ground, who are doing that work, and advise us on policies that are not working. And when policies are not working, then it's our job as the voice of the people who have elected us to be able to bring those issues up and bring you all to the table and not just talk to you, but talking with you, but trying to find solutions. Because we know on in this case of being a congresswoman, I know on the federal side what those limitations are. And so working with you all, I'm able to say, okay, this is what I know can be done. And then if it's not in place, then man-made law, man can change law. I always say that.
Absolutely. And I love that. And like I said, I get um, so much information, and I'm just, I got fingers crossed, because I know you would work hand in hand with my organization as well as many other organizations out there, because she really is an amazing soul, and she does care enough to listen and be like, okay, this is what we can do. Because I'll tell you, some of the stuff that I've heard is just insane. And then you disproportionately see things with us people of color, right? As you do with our counterparts. And we need people who are willing to work with our organizations, right? And help those families as well as those inmates, because their lives do matter too. They are human, and we all have a family member or a loved one that we know is incarcerated for whatever the reason may be. That's not what we're here for. You know what I mean? So with that being said, now I want to hit
Yeah.
a, and if you
Anna, can
go ahead.
I add one more thing
Mhm.
to that conversation? I think also when it comes to employment capabilities, I think there should be more incentive programs for employers to
Mhm.
allow for those what we call second chance programs.
Mhm.
And that only happens when organizations like yours are able to work more closely with corporate America and with those small businesses. A lot of times they don't understand what kind of setup or things are going to be needed on that job to make sure that person is able to perform. And many times when they come out of the justice system, they have a mindset that I want to do right. But there's a lot of barriers, and even when you talk about mental health, those
Absolutely.
things having to deal with that. So making sure all of those things that to make them successful when they come out, that's what needs to be in place.
And round of applause. I love that, because that's something I tell my clients all the time. Please make sure you're seeking therapy, see a therapist. And I know a lot of times that's difficult for people to admit to, but anybody who's locked up anywhere, it's normal. You're gonna need to seek therapy for that time and be able to, slowly move into society, right? And be able to work with that. Um, Ms. Stovall, and I want to say something to anybody that's out here listening. Um, your comments are very much, and your questions taken. If you guys want to call in, if not, you guys can write them on here, and we'll read them out, and she will answer them. That's why we're doing this. She wants to answer your questions, okay? Ms. Stovall, now I have to ask you, let's go into disability. The Landon Dunson Act, right? What is it? Landon Dunson, right? Yeah, Landon.
Yeah, Landon Johnson
Yes,
Act,
Lala
yes.
said,
Mhm.
Lala said. The Landon Dunson
Yes.
Act was something that, she dreamed of. Why? Because many of us parents had dealt with a situation at one point or another at CCPS, Clayton County Public Schools, where we didn't trust certain things. Our children came home bruised, or I actually have video footage of a aide actually yanking my son's hand, and all of a sudden in the video, just they couldn't find anything on the video. They couldn't even find the video, but I'm showing them a video from my phone, and just these steps. How would you act to make sure, or what steps would you take, right, to make sure that these children are protected? Because the law was passed, it's a bill, it was passed, but it's at their discretion. So it's at the school district's discretion, according to the way Governor Deal signed it the last when he was in office. Is there anything that you would do to change that or add to it, or what are the steps for these children? Because even with my son, right, he's homeschool, he's virtual, and he's had a hard time because a lot of times he's ignored. They need more attention than anybody else. They're just ignored. And I mean, I have to tell them, make sure you type, and you're asking for extra help. What would you do to make sure that they're not falling more in the cracks, that they're not that child in the back of the class, in the back of the school, the children that are ignored, that everybody forgets? And I know it because I live it.
Yes. So my son, when he was about 4, was diagnosed with ADHD. So I definitely understand the struggles that parents have in the traditional public schools with making sure that your child is not left out or not being set aside to say, oh, that's a bad child, or they can never learn, and all of that. And that's one of the reasons I took to heart the Landon Johnson Act, because I understood the struggle that parents have, and even having that camera in that classroom, making sure, I call it the third eye, because the camera is going to show what it's going to show. And it also protects not just the child, but it protects the educator as well, because
Absolutely.
sometimes there are things that happen in the classroom. And so when we looked at the legislation, we wanted it to be mandated. But when you're having mandates on school systems, you have to have the resources behind it. And so what our strategy was to get the bill passed as it being up to the school system. It wasn't mandatory for them. We did have a few school systems that did implement or had some type of camera program, but it wasn't enough. We wanted in all 159 counties or 180 something school systems across the state. And so once we were able to work out all of the controversial parts of the bill, which I don't understand why it was controversial anyway, it was all about the children, when it came to them being able to have access to the best education for them. Well, before I left, we started working on another bill that would make it mandatory. And then what we had to do was narrow down the scope of the disability. So those who really could not talk, or, be able to verbally express themselves. And so that was kind of still in the formation stage. But then when I realized with the whole process of passing the bill, it took us about 2 years to get Landon Johnson bill passed. And those of you all who want to look it up, you can Google HB 614 Landon Johnson Act, and you could be able to tell what the bill was all about. But I think the bigger picture is on the federal level, which we're talking about in Washington, D.C. And me as a congresswoman is being able to expound upon HB 614 to make it on the federal level, to make sure funds are set aside for being able to help with those classroom cameras. And also bringing in our corporate America, our small business and businesses, to be able to help support that effort as well. I think when you're talking about education, many times the businesses are pushed to the side. It's only we're going to call you when we need you, but we don't bring them in as partners along the process to making sure, because they have an investment to look at. Their investment is the workforce, and those individuals with disability that may be in what's called the transition program, which means that they're not going through the regular track of education. They're in a different program, but they're going to be adults, and hopefully they're able to be able to take care of themselves. And so with that, we have to have training programs set aside for them as well. and talking with those companies to be able to make the accommodations that are necessary for those children. So just for the community of uh, those that are individuals with disability, whether they're children, whether they're adults, because there's some issues with Medicaid um, waiver program. That whole process is so long, tedious. A lot of times when you end up having an adult child with a disability, having to go through that process. I have a good friend of mine that had ended up calling me in to sit in on some of the meetings so that I could be able to kind of be able to speak for her on some of the departments of behavior and developmental health for the state. So I understand the struggle, and you definitely will have an advocate in Washington, D.C. when it comes to that. And that means forming a coalition of saying, hey, what is it that you all are facing? What are those policies or those rules that are in place that makes it so difficult for you as a parent to be able to make sure you have what you need for your child? One of the other bills that I always have supported was the special needs scholarship bill. I supported that every year as a state legislator because the reality is our traditional schools, I don't think, are really equipped to be able to handle what's needed for our special needs students. And parents like yourself, and even with Lala, when we were taught, when you drop your child off, you knowing that that child has some limitations, you're worried at work all day long because you don't know what's happening with your child at that particular school. So you want to be able to have comfort in knowing that when you drop your child off in whatever educational setting, that they're getting the best education and that their specific needs according to their IEP is being met.
Um, you hit up on a lot, and I love everything that you said as a special needs parent, because as all of it, as an advocate, as a special needs parent, because I do disability as well as human rights, right? Which that falls all into the same thing, but I specifically do that because of my child. We have a question here for you. The question is, what about children that are being abused or molested? And I think this can go for adults as well, disabled, as well as elderly community, right? By teachers, because teachers are tenure, it's covered up. What's the protection that can be put in place to protect our children?
Well, I think too, as well, is I wouldn't say get rid of tenure because I think that being fair to our educators, those who are doing the right thing, they have put the time in. But I do believe that there, in those cases of child molestation or abuse, those are special cases that need to be um, investigated even further beyond just a regular student saying, that teacher, or just beyond the regular scope of what the school systems usually do. And so that might mean bringing in GBI or someone else that specializes in those types of cases that are beyond the scope of our traditional schools and non-traditional schools. Because sometimes when certain words are used, certain things are happening, because the educator or those in the education field, that's not their specialty. They're not specialized in identifying crimes and being able to know there's certain techniques or certain things that a crime investigator, when they come in, because they're trained in that. Educators are not trained in that. The school system is not trained in that when it comes down to those cases. So I think being able to escalate that, and that means that they have to have resources in the schools to be able to do that. And when a parent, puts in that complaint, it should not sit on someone's desk for a long period of time. Those are complaints that should be escalated. We did a bill down at the state capitol some years ago when a lot of abuse was going on with senior citizens. And what we had to do then was allocate special investigators for being able to investigate senior citizen abuse. Because what was happening, the people who were being accused, the accusers, were not coming before the court quickly. And so we can look at the same concept when it comes down to those sensitive cases like that, because they're very sensitive. And of course, you don't want the wrong person accused of something and you don't get a fairness in trial when it comes down to that accusation. So I think bringing in the specialists, those who are trained in those areas, who have continued training in those areas, bringing them into the system in school systems and figure out what's the best route. And even talk to you all as parents. You all have, many complaints about, hey, I put in a request or I made a complaint, nobody got back to me. So what are bringing all the sides together so we can be able to find out what's the best solution for that. But I would say having those other special investigators. There already GBI has a special unit that does deal with child abuse, child cases, even child suicide, which is another high rise, especially among students with disability, because they feel no one is listening to them and they're bullied even more than the traditional students. So all of that kind of falls in those categories.
Wow. And that's something I learned new. I didn't know they had a special unit for that, because that was going to be one of my questions to you, because their suicide rate, or the point where they get pushed so much because of the bullying, right? That they do things they shouldn't do in school. Let's just say mass things that shouldn't be happening. The next question is, what are you doing for the falsely accused? And I'm assuming this is across the board. What would be your take on that, and how would you help our community with that?
Okay. Well, right now I'm not doing anything. I'm not elected, so I don't have any power to for legislative wise. But as a community person and as your next congresswoman in Washington D.C., like I said, that is not my area of expertise. You asked me something about education, we could talk all day long, or small business, we could talk all day long. So that's why I have to depend on those who are in that situation and looking at those departments as well that actually handle when it comes to falsely accused. Here in America, of course, everyone is innocent until proven guilty, but sometimes that process does not happen like it should happen, and people get accused. Their name is smudged in the news, and you end up finding out so many years or months later that they never did do that. I have a friend of mine who son was accused of child abuse, and he was not there, and even the police department made up a false report, and even had said that they had a warrant out on him, and there never was a warrant filed. So you have some bad actors in the justice system, and we have to make sure that we are diligent about removing them out, because the trust of the community is very important when it comes down to our justice system. That's all we have here in America is our justice system. And if we feel that it's not fairly treating us fairly, then we don't know what else. And then it becomes a wild, wild west situation, because everybody's now trying to protect themselves instead of letting it go through the justice system.
And you said something. You said that you're not elected yet, but we're speaking as if you're elected. I think you guys know which way I'm going to vote during elections. I never really say. I just kind of say you have my full support. So you guys, to all my followers, especially the ones in Georgia, make sure you continue following Ms. Stovall. I really want you guys, because she's saying it's not yet, but she's already there. We already claim it. We see it. You're already there. You're working for us, because that's what we need. We don't care about, look, they're laughing. We don't care about people that just forget us. They forget the community. They forget all of us. And when I say us, I mean all of us. They say things, and then it's like we're forgotten. So I think a lot of people, and I have a lot of followers, right, that because of the human justice, they're going to ask you some questions. So I guess answer the best that you can, if possible. And then they're asking here, what are her views in regards to the parole situation in GDC, I'm sorry.
Okay. I think I kind of mentioned that earlier when we talked about the whole parole. I'm not sure what else that they want me to mention is that, in every department when it's not working, and this is one of the things I learned as a state legislator, then you have to go in and fix those problems. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer because some of the problems have lasted a long time. But one thing I always say is that if I don't know what the problem is, then I don't know how to go in and try to find a solution on to fix it. So, as those who are your listening audience continue to advocate for, for those issues until they are resolved. And it may take one time, it may take several times. Because I'm not really, really familiar with when it comes down to what's actually going on in parole. I know I hear a lot because I get a lot, have gotten a lot of letters. So those are things I can speak on. But if it's anything specific for that person who asked that particular question, I would like to turn the question back to them and say, what do you think should be done with the Georgia GDC that's not happening that you think would be more of a fair process? And then that's something we could work on. But even though that's on the state level, but as a federal congressional person, we work with the state a lot. And sometimes the state's hands are tied because of federal policies that are put in place. And then sometimes those state hands are tied because they don't have the resources that they need. So those two things work together hand in hand. But for immediate response, I would definitely encourage them to contact their state elected officials. You have a representative and a senator. Everyone has two people that represent them directly at the Georgia state capitol. And so reach out to them. You can put in, if you go to openstates.org, openstates, states.org, you put in your address, and then it will tell you who your elected officials are that represent you. And reach out to them, because when you say Georgia, that's something specific that's up under the state of Georgia government, and they have a say so about that, and they can help pass legislation to change those issues. And remember, some things are legislated, which are in law, and other things are what we call bureaucracy. And that means that as a state and even on the federal level, we give a certain amount of ability and power to department heads to be able to make decisions so that every time they have a problem, they don't have to come to the legislative body. And that's on the federal level, on the state level, and also on your local level. So there may be a glitch in the system, not necessarily about a policy that was passed, but about something that bureaucracy has put in place, thinking that it's a good thing or makes it easier for them because they're the one having to process the paperwork.
Okay, I like this next question because I'm really big on the environment too. That's a good one for Ms. Stovall. What are your views on cleaning up the environment?
Well, definitely, we can't get away from climate change and those things that are happening in the environment. First thing, there are like kind of different phases to that. First, we have to start with our young people early on, with educating them about why it's important to take care of the environment where you live and where your future children's children are going to be. One of the things I've done as a proactive measure, I worked with the National Wildlife Federation and Forest Park High School PTSA. And with that, we came up with a program which was an environmental assessment program, where we had the students to come up with questions to be able to ask the community about the environment. So we trained them on how to go out and ask those questions. They then took the data, compiled it into a report, and then they gave a presentation to the community. They also went before the city Forest Park mayor and city council to make that presentation about what things they saw from a youth perspective eyes on what things need to be changed. So I think having more of those environmental conversations and activities to teaching them about, hey, this is something that's a party. We need to have, of course, a lot of more community gardens that are implemented, and we could do that even with the school districts across this state, and even in Congressional District 5. It's not too early to start that as well, because you think about it, it builds in math, science, language arts, all those areas where we are saying that our children are weak in, especially our minority students are weak in certain areas, and that helps. The last thing is that looking at how do we monetize recycling. So I was shared a video today of a doctor, a scientist in Australia, where she had created a machine that would take recycled plastic, rubber from tires, and some other items like old clothing and all of that, mix it together, and those particles are then put in that actually make tile for your house, or a tile that you want to put ceramic tile. So you're looking
Mhm.
at waste that we have that now does not have to go into a waste station, or put somewhere where it's going to end up being bad for our environment. Then now we're recycling, and now it's monetized, because guess what? People buy tile, ceramic tile, all the time, and it can be decorated in all kinds of colors. So if that's done in Australia, why can't we bring it to Congressional District 5? Another video that I saw that was shared with me was a young lady in Kenya, Africa, where she was taking recycled material as well, and creating bricks to be able to put on the on for just like cement bricks for buildings and even on roads. So just
Mhm.
think, she's doing something that was, we looked at as thrown away, not any good, and now have recycled it back to be able to make it monetized. And I think that when you're talking about young people and even adults being able to monetize it, what's wrong with, now a lot of the cities have recycling programs where they had those two trash cans out there. They had a blue one, then you have your green one. Most people don't understand what in the world they're supposed to put in the blue. Sometimes I still get confused. But what if there was a type of program that monetized that and said, hey, you get so much off your solid waste bill if you're recycling, and you give them a poster where they know what items need to go into that recycling receptacle. And then now they're incentivized, because everybody loves incentives. So now they're incentivized, and look at what that balance when it comes down to, okay, we might be deducting or reducing your taxes, but at the same time we're helping the environment, and that means there's less amount of waste that's going into our society.
And Valencia, that's one thing that I know I noticed when I first moved to Georgia from Florida. Like, Florida's real big on recycle, right? That a lot of people were not doing it. But I think it's lack of education. Like, you can't do something that you haven't been taught to do. So I love the way you're going back, giving an incentive. An incentive always works. You can always get anybody to do anything. You get something for free, you're like, okay, I'll try it. You know what I'm saying? So it always works. But then I think the most important part is teaching them, because we have to teach the community, okay, you can't just throw stuff all over, or just throw stuff everywhere, or or just, in one bin, when there's actually separate bins that you could throw all your different stuff in, and then, it'll be better for the environment. So aside of the recycling, uh, with the environment, what are your takes on other things with the environment? I love the idea of the recycling, and I'll tell you guys, I lived in Europe for a good 8 years of my life. Europe is awesome, and they're so advanced at things that they do that we need to just get some of those ideas and start using them. Malicia is so right when she's saying, I see these videos, because we just need to be a little bit more open-minded. I think we just think we're just the best country in the world, and we're just so close-minded, and we just need to open up, because some of the stuff they're doing in their country is so much better. Is there anything else that you have a take on besides the recycling when it comes to that?
I think too, ramping up the engagement and investment when it comes to carbon neutral efforts. It's
Mhm,
going to
mhm,
take, a lot of, and I think when you talk about greening Georgia, since we're here in Georgia, greening,
mhm,
when it comes to natural, it still goes back to a lot with education. And
mhm,
so when you're saying we want to do an investment or reinvest back in, people want to know, what does that mean? What does that look like for me? What does
mhm,
it look like? Now you have a lot that's going on with the electric cars, and then of course the whole thing that we're seeing, what's going on with the oil, um, that's now affecting gas prices here
mhm,
in the U.S. Because of the war. So all of
mhm,
those things are what we have to look at holistically, and it may be that we have to do a little of this at the same time, or it might be that we have to focus on this for right now. But that's where the experts come in. Those scientists can say, hey, these are the things that are now causing the glaciers to melt. And when that happens, it's a disruption, with with the earth and everything. And even when you see what's going on with, You don't hear as many. I was talking with someone. We was talking about fireflies. There's a reason we don't see a whole lot of fireflies. When I was little, we used to catch them in the jars, and of
Mm-hmm.
course we would let them go. But you don't see that a lot. So that means something is definitely happening in the atmosphere that's causing that. And anytime that's happening to fireflies, then we know that everything else is happening to the food that we're consuming, because it's still they all taken into the environment.
Um, and talking of food, um, are you a believer in, I'm a big believer in planting gardens, right? I'm a believer if somebody needs a fruit, somebody needs to eat, there's a tree right there, let the community have it. Is that something that you have a view on, that you're like, yes, let's work on this for this district, to make sure that they're having this happen in their community, or is it already going on?
Well, it's going on, but not in on a large scale. I'll
Mhm.
give you an example. Over in Southeast Atlanta, there was an initiative doing a food forest, where they were planting fruit trees and all those other trees that people can just freely come and eat the fruit off, get as much as you want. And
Mhm.
so was working with Forest Park High School with kind of doing the same initiative. With
Mhm.
just think of going on a high school campus, and the children can walk around anywhere and being able to partake of fruits and being able to have vegetables and all of that. But like I
Mhm.
said, you bringing it into the curriculum and you teaching them about it, because in Congressional District 5, especially the southern part, it is a food desert. That means that we don't have access to fresh fruits and vegetables that are affordable. And so what happens is many times the parents are forced, because of limited income. I'm gonna go to the fast food restaurant faster than me going to the grocery store to be able to get that, or to just take the time to plant it in my yard if I have space to be able to do it. Now, once they plant it, if you don't know how to prepare it and cook it, what's the use of even planting it? So it's all about the whole part about education, and especially in the inner city. And a lot of times when you think of food, people think about a farm. Oh, I don't want to be working on a farm. That's down in the country area, or the rural area. But there's a certain thing as urban farming that needs to take place as well.
Okay. So this question, it's funny. It's going to kind of go hand in hand what they're asking, to kind of what I asked. So I know you might catch yourself repeating some of it, but I want to make sure that every question is answered. What are your views on the food supply shortage in the inner city?
A very good question. There is definitely, like I said before, it is a food desert, and we have to look at all the means and opportunities that we have. Starting even with our school system. Where they're how they're purchasing their foods. There are quite a few companies that have come into the Congressional District 5, when it comes down to different ways of growing food on the inside of the buildings, where they don't have, it's not necessarily exposed to the environments of the outside environments. And so looking at other those other means of that, which is also good for when it comes to workforce development. So when you're looking at things, to me, I always try to look at it holistic. Okay, we need better food opportunities for the inner city, and then also at the same time, because we have a lot of issues with poverty or lower income, then how do we bring those people out of poverty? It starts with education and it starts with training. So simultaneously, while we are helping to make sure we have access to more food, fresh fruits and vegetables, through community gardening, through other companies that are now doing a lot of food growth inside of buildings where they're renovating old warehouses to be able to do that. How do we now also make sure that our young people are trained so that they can now have higher paying jobs? Then guess what? They can afford that fresh fruit and vegetable for their family. And then when the whole issue with healthcare now becomes holistic, because have so many people in the inner city, especially in those areas that have lower income, with health conditions because now they're able to eat better, and so that takes the cost of healthcare down.
Are you guys now starting to understand why I love this lady? You guys starting to understand now? Your views are so much like mine. It's unbelievable. I'm just smiling. Normally, my face tells it all when I'm not happy with something, but everything you've said is music to my heart, music to my ears, and just that's what we need. Now, I want to ask you a question that was asked to me off air because they are messaging. You mentioned business. What are your views and how can you help with businesses? So I'm not sure where they're going with that question, but hopefully you can answer that the best that you can.
Yes. So being a business owner, myself, our family had a promotional printing business for almost 30 years. And so of course we downsized it, still doing the promotional printing part. But I understand the struggle with small businesses. Small businesses make up about 60% in our communities. And without small business, of course, you wouldn't have large businesses. So, usually small business eventually want to grow. And we have to have those programs in place to be able to help support them. We have the Georgia Department with Small Business Development Centers across the state, which are located on each one of our four-year university campuses. But all of them don't function at the same level, and they are SBA granted. That means grant money they receive from the federal government. So when I talk about state level and I talk about that connection with the federal level, it starts at the top. And that's why, as your congresswoman, I want to be at the top. I know what it is on the state level, so I'm able to take that same knowledge to the federal level. Another area with small businesses, besides the resources that's needed, we need to reclassify and make micro small business as a category. Because right now you have small business. Now, when you think about what happened during the COVID-19 and the pandemic, when those EDL loans were coming down, the PPPs were coming down to businesses, they were in categories. So what happened if you had a business that, say you only had 10 to 50, maybe 10 to maybe 100 employees, you were kind of lumped into the 100 to 500, that category with up to 500. Well, you're never going to be able to compete. Most of the times, those large businesses were getting the money. And then that left those small businesses in our community that we depend on a whole lot. Many of them left them in financial strain that some of them had to close and probably would not open back up again. And then that also opens up a category for the people who want to start business. A lot of people end up starting business during this whole pandemic because they had a lot of more time to be able to be creative for that. So we have to be able to support those small business owners. They don't know about government contracting. That's always when you hear about it as a small business owner, you think it just kind of goes over your head. So we need to have opportunities, programs, and town halls, making sure that they understand and taking their hand as a small business owner. You need someone to take your hand and walk you through the process, not say, okay, go fill this out and come back. No, okay, this is why you need to fill this out. This is the next step. This is the next step. And then for those nonprofits, which are considered businesses as well, a lot of times trying to apply for a grant on grants.gov gives you a headache, your eyes start spinning and all kind of stuff, because especially if this is your first time doing it. So putting those, I call them those small steps in place will help make our small business more successful. When there's a successful small business in our community, hiring can take place. We have people that will be able to really work, and then the economy starts turning. And then when people have talked about living communities where you're able to work, play, and eat and enjoy your community, that happens when all of those wheels are turning together. But it starts with those small businesses.
That's right. Valencia, that's good stuff. Like I'm excited because I fall into the business and then the nonprofit. So I fall into all of that. So it's relieving to hear, because for me, the whole PPP PPP loans was just a whole mess. I was like, that's a little bit confusing. I'll just continue paying for everything myself, and we'll handle that with taxes, right? There's no way. And then you're right. A lot of businesses closed down. They don't exist anymore, especially those mom and pop shops. They're gone. They're gone because of what took place with the. I'm sorry. It looks like what took place with the pandemic. Uh, the pandemic. What are your views on that as of right now? Because it keeps going back and forth. What are your views on the whole pandemic and everything going on with that?
Yeah, so we're still in a crisis, even though some things have been, kind of loosened a little bit. We're now dealing with long COVID. So those individuals who have suffered from COVID, we're seeing some cases, and a lot of cases where they are now having other issues, health issues that they didn't have before, because of what's going on with COVID and how it affected their bodies. And so we need to be able to make sure that our scientists and researchers are able to be able to research and make sure that they're finding solutions and working for solutions for long COVID. Now we have a healthcare crisis. It was already, condensed, and we had a lot of issues with healthcare. Now with the pandemic, it has increased it. There's a workforce shortage with nurses and doctors, and even when it comes down to professionals who are actually teaching the nurses and doctors, their pay scale is not where it should be. So what is happening is you're having nurses that say, I stay in the field because I get paid more than me taking time to teach, the students they need. And also we have registered nurses that are trained at the same level as doctors, and they should be allowed to practice to the extent of their education. Of course, they're still under the doctor's, oversight, but that'll also help those areas where we have a shortage of doctors, like OBGYN is one.
Absolutely.
A lot of other primary care doctors we have shortages in. And just think, we have a large, Georgia's one of the top states for maternal mortality, where women are dying after giving birth because of that long time for a whole year. They're not able to get the treatment they need. I sat on the House Study Committee for that, and also sat on the Small Business Committee, House Committee, Economic Development and Tourism. So that's why I'm able to kind of talk a lot about the business aspect. And I sat on the Education Committee and actually had a leadership position at the state capitol as the vice chair of academic support. And so I'm able to work across the aisle to be able to make sure that voices of the people are heard without compromising what I believe in. And that's how I was so successful at the Capitol. But going back to that healthcare issue, it's a lot more research and stuff that has to be done. And we need to make sure that people who are there, and let the doctors be able to practice what they know best to handle these situations without tying their hands.
I don't know if you're aware of it, Ms. Stovall, but I do have medical training as well. And that's all awesome, what you have said, because that nurse, you probably know more than the doctor. You're just not allowed to practice. You're not. You don't. They hold extra stuff you don't. Those assistants, those LPNs, they're not allowed to, do certain things. So I like what you're saying, and I like your views on that. And I just hope that, you can jump more, because we're already going to claim it that you're already there, right? In office, and, talking about certain things and or certain topics and views and whatever is going on, and voting on things. So I really hope, right, that we can get you to be able to help with these issues, because I think that's very important. As you guys know, many have, we all scroll or watch it on the TV, right? So many people have left. You're tired, you're burnt out. The pandemic was stressful for everyone. Or, their views on whether to get vaccinated, not get vaccinated, their views on that as well, which brings a whole other issue and a whole other can of worms there. Should we not, which is another issue. How do you feel about that? Should you leave it up to them? Are you with our commander-in-chief on that topic, or should it be mandated because they are in the hospital and because so many people's lives are at risk? What is your take on that? If you could answer your view, right?
Yeah. So my view when it comes down to whether vaccinated or not is still according to what is the effect of the health crisis. And so in the hospitals you have areas that where you have intensive care patients and those who are subject to immune deficiencies, that
Mm-hmm.
any little small thing may take them in a whole nother category. And I think that if what the experts are saying is that if you're around those particular patients, you need to be vaccinated. If that's what the experts are saying, I'm not an expert, so I can't say this is what this is. I can have my view, but that's what I talked about: trust. Trust in the government that what they're saying, what the doctors are saying, what the experts, the CDC and the National Health, all of them are saying. This is what we found because we're the experts. We've gone to school, we've studied, we researched, and so if that's what the experts said, then that's who I lean on. If that's not what the experts say, then of course it becomes a matter of opinion, and people begin to say, well, that's my freedom of choice to do this and that. But when it comes down to, especially when you're taking care of adults and children or people that are in those areas that are subject to that, then I think we have to go with what the experts say. And if they say, hey, we need to make sure it's done like this, then we need to, because some things we're not privy to. And even, as I'm talking now, there's some things that the doctors and scientists know that we will never know as the general public as to why certain decisions are made, because they may see something coming in the future that we don't have any clue about. So that's why it's important to have trust in the public health system. And we have to make sure they have the resources and everything they need so that they can be able to give us the best answer that they see as them being the experts.
Um, I have a question. It was messaged to me. For whatever reason, they don't want to write it. What is your view from a federal standpoint? A lot of inmates passed away during this pandemic. For another outbreak or another pandemic happening, what are your views on someone helping them or helping, you know, those people who are institutionalized?
Yeah. I believe that everyone has the right, and we have a responsibility as the government to make sure everyone is safe and that they have access to health care, everything that they need. It does not matter, irregardless of what crime was committed, what crime was not committed. That's a part of what we call human life and respecting human life. And so if they are incarcerated, that's a responsibility of the government to make sure that those individuals, especially during the time of the pandemic, were had the resources, because a lot of things go back to resources and decisions that are made. So making sure they had that adequate information and the best outcome and the best information and policy in place to be able to handle those inmates, whether it was being able to separate them within whatever the limited space that they had, and making sure that they were getting the treatment that they needed to get. So I don't think that they should have been treated any different than those of us who are able to be free and walk freely now, because they're still a human being.
I absolutely love that. Ms. Stovall, and we're going at the hour mark, man. I could talk to you
Oh,
for about
okay.
3 hours. I can talk to you for about 3 hours. I want to, first of all, before I say anything else, anytime you want, up to the elections, you are more than welcome to come back on my platform. You just call me, message me, whatever you want. Look, Anna, I want to come back on, or have somebody from your team reach out, and I will make that happen, okay? Because I have enjoyed this like there is no tomorrow. At all. Now, my next question is, if they wanted to donate, I know there's a certain procedure for that. Are you taking donations, and how can they reach out? How can they follow? All that good information, if you could leave it to them before leaving. And if I said something I wasn't supposed to about the donations, please correct me, please.
No, you were very safe with your statement. Yes, so as a campaign, you have to have, resources, and money is one of those resources in order to get the word out. And that's one of the things, like you are listening, have heard my viewpoints. Well, there are so many people that won't get a chance to hear my viewpoint if we don't have the money that's needed to be able to get it out on other platforms. But, so you could go to my website, gostovall.com. That's GOSTOVALL.com. Hit the donate button. Wherever you're able to give, we are most appreciative. And if you're able, the maximum amount is $2,900. And so we'll take the $2,900. We'll take $5. We'll take $1 because we want to get the message out. We want to be able to have bulletin boards up, the billboards up. We want to be able to have radio advertisement, TV advertisement. We want to get our signs out. We want to get mailers out. All of that costs money, and we can't do it without your support. This is a grassroots campaign. My opponent, they're going to spend big money to keep that person into office. And so I'm the one that's has proven record, proven leadership when it comes to being committed and accessible to the people. If I don't know an answer, I will tell you I don't know an answer, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to go and find out what that solution or that answer is. So you want someone who's going to speak for you boldly and be accessible and be solution driven. We already know what the problems are. We just need solutions. So remember, Stovall for Congress. I'm on all the social platforms, Valencia Stovall. And so I appreciate Anna so much. I appreciate your audience and all the questions that they gave. And if you have any other additional questions, you can go to my website. My email is hello@gostovall.com. And feel free to send that in. If you all have a platform that you would like me to come and speak on, then definitely reach out to our campaign.
So Ms. Stovall, I am going to reach out to your campaign too, because I'd like to connect your camp with some of the people I know within the entertainment industry as well. Together we can make this happen, right? So just know that you have 2,000% of my support, and hopefully my viewers as well and my followers as well. You guys, if you guys are a fan of Lunchtime with Anna or just Anna in general, hey, I'm a little biased, but it's for a reason, because I like what she says. It's about us, right? It's not about what, let me get into office and then forget all of you guys. Her track record has proven it. And I was actually going to read at the beginning, but she just said like her accomplishments. She can do that because she's done that. So like I said, anything that you guys need, you guys know how to follow her. If not, reach out to me. I've had Ms. Stovall on my Facebook, I think, for about 5 years, maybe longer. So it's been a long time. And so I've kind of followed her throughout the years, and nothing ever changes with her. So know that as a special needs parent, as a small business owner, as a nonprofit CEO and founder, and all the many hats that I wear, you have 2,000% of my support, and hopefully my followers as well. With that being said, thank you so much for stopping in. And like I said, anytime you want, let me know, and we'll be back together. God bless you guys. Bye.
Bye-bye.